The voice of a man who finally stopped looking outward for what was always already inside. I know the man who needs the room to see him. I was that man longer than I'll admit, performing strength for people who were only watching to measure what they lacked, using my certainty to fill their doubt, leaving every room slightly emptier than when I entered. The day I stopped, the room got quiet, and in that quiet, I finally heard something I had been drowning out for years. There is a difference, and it matters, between the man who needs your approval to know his worth, and the man who already knows and simply moves. I don't post the proof, I don't announce the work, I don't need your eyes to make it real. Real power needs no audience. Real peace needs no performance. I have watched men build entire lives from the outside in. Every choice a calculation, every move a question. Will they approve, will they applaud, will the numbers confirm that I exist? I built mine differently, from the inside out, brick by brick, in the hours nobody photographed, until the foundation was solid enough that I stopped needing anyone to tell me it was there. There is a difference, and it matters, between the man who needs your approval to know his worth, and the man who already knows and simply moves. I don't post the proof, I don't announce the work, I don't need your eyes to make it real. Real power needs no audience. Real peace needs no performance. I watch them curating this certainty, choosing angles, choosing light, choosing the version of themselves that performs most convincingly. And I understand it, the hunger beneath it, the fear that without the external mirror, they might not be able to see themselves at all. I don't have that fear. I know what I am in the dark, in the silence, when nobody is looking. The knowing is the only mirror I need. There is a question worth asking, not out loud, specific quiet of an honest moment? Are you building a life based on inner peace? Or are you still constructing yourself from the outside in, waiting for the approval that will never be enough? Because approval from outside can never fill what was always supposed to be built from within. I asked myself that question once. The answer changed everything. There is a difference, and it matters, between the man who needs your approval to know his worth, and the man who already knows and simply moves. I don't post the proof, I don't announce the work, I don't need your eyes to make it real. Real power needs no audience. Real peace needs no performance. He leaves the bar the way secure men leave, without checking if anyone noticed, without the pause at the door that asks for one last look. He simply goes, because where he's going doesn't require an audience either, and the life he's building there is entirely his own. Real power needs no stage, built from the inside. Real power needs no stage, already enough. Real power needs no stage. Like a man who finally understood his own chains. If their words can break you, they own you. Simple as that, no ceremony, no complexity. The man who collapses under an insult has handed his foundation to anyone with a mouth and a reason to use it. The man who inflates under applause has handed his ceiling to anyone willing to clap. Both men are slaves, different masters, same chains. My mind belongs to no one who opens their mouth. Not the one who praises, not the one who doubts, not the crowd that cheers me, not the voice that lies. My value was established before anyone opened their eyes. I have felt both the particular collapse of a man who heard one wrong word from one wrong mouth and let it rearrange everything he thought he was. Then the particular inflation of a man who heard applause and mistook the noise for truth, expanding into it, needing more, needing louder, becoming nothing without the echo. I was both men before I understood that both were prisons with different decorations. My mind belongs to no one who opens their mouth, not the one who praises, not the one who doubts, not the crowd that cheers me, not the voice that lies. My value was established before anyone opened their eyes. I watch men destroyed by a sentence. One sentence from one person on one ordinary day. And I understand, because I know what it means to have built yourself on the unstable ground of what others are willing to say about you. It collapses. It always collapses, because other people's words are weather. No man should build his house from weather. Build from stone, from what you know, when nobody is speaking. The discipline is this: to hear the insult and let it pass, the way wind passes felt but not structural. To hear the praise and receive it lightly like rain on a roof, welcome but not load bearing. To stand in both without moving, that stillness, that specific immovable stillness is the only freedom that cannot be taken by anyone who opens their mouth. I practice it daily. I fail sometimes, I return, because the alternative is a life spent as property, belonging to whoever spoke a last. To my mind belongs to no one who opens their mouth, not the one who praises, not the one who doubts, not the crowd that cheers me, not the voice that lies. My value was established before anyone opened their eyes. He walks out tonight, two people who are talking about him. He knows he doesn't slow, because what they say lands on the outside of something solid and slides off, the way rain slides off stone, the way words slide off a man who already knows what he is and required no one's permission to know it. My mind is my own. No one holds the key. My mind is my own. Nobody owns choice of a man standing between two kinds of pain with no painless exit. Nobody tells you that the hardest decisions aren't between right and wrong. They're between two aches, two costs, two versions of a morning you don't want. One where you stay and nothing changed, one where you left and everything did. Both hurt, that's the whole truth. Nobody says out loud. The question was never which choice is painless. The question was always, which pain are you willing to carry? Every hard decision is just choosing your pain. The pain of leaving, the pain of the same. One hurts now, sharp and clean. One hurts slowly, dull and deep. Choose the pain that builds you, not the one that simply keeps you asleep. I've sat at that table, both options laid out in front of me like evidence. The anguish of releasing something I had carried so long it felt like identity, and the anguish of another year in the same place, same wall, same ceiling, same man in the mirror who knew the answer and kept asking the question. I sat there longer than I should have, hoping a third option would appear. It never does. Every hard decision is just choosing your pain. The pain of leaving, the pain of the same. One hurts now, sharp and clean. One hurts slowly, dull and deep. Choose the pain that builds you, not the one that simply keeps you asleep. I watch men choose the familiar pain every time, not because it hurts less, because it is known. And there's a comfort, however thin, in a pain you already know the shape of. The unknown pain of change feels enormous from a distance. It almost never is. What is enormous is another year of the known pain. The slow erosion of a man who knew what he needed to do and chose the comfortable ache over the necessary one. Two pains in conversation, neither winning, the man choosing anyway. The question is not which choice is safe. There's no safe. The question is which pain produces something, which ache is pointed in the direction of the man you are supposed to become, and which one simply maintains the man you are tired of being. That is the only compass available at that table. Not comfort, direction. Which pain goes somewhere. Choose that one every time, even when it is the harder one. Especially then, every hard decision is just choosing your pain. The pain of leaving, the pain of the same. One hurts now, sharp and clean. One hurts slowly, dull and deep. Choose the pain that builds you, not the one that simply keeps you asleep. He makes the choice tonight, not because he is ready. Nobody is ever ready, because he finally understood that waiting for ready was just a familiar pain disguised as wisdom. He walks out into the sharp kind, the kind that hurts now, the kind that goes somewhere. Cold street, open road, the particular discomfort of a man moving in the right direction for the first time in too long. It hurts. He keeps walking. That is the answer. That was always the answer. Choose the pain that builds, moving through the shower. Choose the pain that builds, going somewhere now. Choose the pain that builds. The strongest man I ever met spoke softly. Didn't need the room to part for him. Didn't need the entrance, didn't need the eyes. He just arrived, and the temperature changed. The way temperature changes when something real enters a room full of performances. Nobody announced him. He would have hated that. The strongest men are gentle because they have nothing to defend. The loudest voice is always the most afraid. The fullest life is almost never displayed. The deepest man says least about his depth. True power is the exhale after the proof no longer matters. I have known rich men who live simply, not from poverty of imagination, from the understanding that accumulation is the hobby of men who are still trying to convince themselves of something. The man who has enough inside needs very little outside. I have known happy men who told nobody kept it close, private, like a fire you maintain, not to show others you have warmth, but because you need it. The loudest voice is always the most afraid. The fullest life is almost never displayed. The deepest man says least about his depth. True power is the exhale after the proof no longer matters. I watch them performing power. The volume, the posture, the careful construction of an image that says I have arrived. And I think, the man who has arrived doesn't need the sign. The river doesn't announce its depth. You find out when you step in. The mountain doesn't advertise its height. You find out when you try to climb. The powerful man doesn't tell you he is powerful. You find out when you need him, and he is simply already there. There's a kind of man the world consistently underestimates. The quiet one, the gentle one, the one who smiles and says a little and pays attention to everything. The world mistakes its silence for absence. It is not absence. It is the fullest possible presence. The presence of a man so complete within himself that he requires nothing from the room, and therefore sees everything the room is trying to hide. That man is the most powerful person in any space he enters. He just never tells you that. The loudest voice is always the most afraid. The fullest life is almost never displayed. The deepest man says least about his depth. True power is the exhale after the proof no longer matters. He finishes his drink, leaves a generous tip, says nothing remarkable, walks out into the night the way rivers walk into the sea, without ceremony, without needing the sea to acknowledge the arrival. Just movement, just direction, just the quiet absolute authority of a man who proved nothing tonight, because he has nothing left to prove. True power needs no stage, gentle and complete. True power needs no stage, nothing left to prove. True power needs no stage. voice of a man who understood the difference before it was too late. I have been the blade forged in anger, sharpened by every wound that was handed to me like a gift nobody asked for. Anger is honest. Anger says this was wrong, this cost something real. This will not be accepted without a response. Anger made me sharp. Anger made me move. Anger was the fire under the metal when everything needed to be remade. But I watched what came after anger in men who didn't know the difference. Hatred destroys. One is fundamental, one is acid through bone. You were born to hurt the darkness, not to live in it, not to become it, not to forget which side of the blade you're on. Hatred is different. Hatred is what happens when a man takes the anger that was supposed to move him forward and turns it inward, lets it stay, feeds it, names it, builds his identity around the wound instead of around the healing. I have felt it, the particular warmth of hatred, how it feels like power at first, how it feels like clarity, how it gives the days a direction until you realize the direction is down, and the only thing you're cutting is yourself. One is fire under metal, one is acid through bone. You were born to hurt the darkness, not to live in it, not to become it, not to forget which side of the blade you're on. I've watched men rust from the inside, started as blades forged right, tempered by real pain, and the pain became the residence, not the forge, the home. And the man who was built to cut through darkness became the darkness he was built to fight. Nobody warned them, nobody said the anger is the tool, not the identity. Use it, then put it down. A blade left in the wound helps nobody. like a weapon, not like a home. Into the darkness like a man on a mission, not like a man who forgot the exit. You were not built to be consumed by what you fight. You were built to fight it, walk through it, emerge from it, carrying whatever light you found on the other side. That is the blade's purpose. Not to rust, not to remain buried in what it cut, to return clean, sharp, ready for whatever darkness comes next. Be the blade, never become the rust. Anger sharpens, hatred destroys. One is fire under metal, one is acid through bone. You were born to hurt the darkness, not to live in it, not to become it, not to forget which side of the blade you're on. He walks out still sharp, not because nothing cut him tonight, because he knows the difference between a wound that teaches and a wound you move into and call home. He chooses the teaching every night, every cut, every dark thing that came for him, and found a blade instead of a man who forgot what he was built for. Born to cut the dark, never live in it. Born to cut the dark. The voice of a man who read the oldest warning and finally understood it. The strongest man who ever lived was not defeated by an army, not by superior force, not by anything that arrived with a weapon. He was defeated by a voice, soft, patient, asking the same question, night after night, until the answer that should never have been given was given. Strength without discipline is just power, waiting for the right hands to take it. And desire always knows which hands to use. If the strongest man fell to it, what makes you certain you will not? If the wisest man built his ruin from 1,000 beautiful distractions, what makes you believe your wisdom is sufficient without the God? The oldest enemy never arrives as an enemy. It arrives as exactly what you want. The wisest man who ever lived wrote about wisdom with one hand and accumulated every distraction that wisdom warned against with the other. 1,000 distractions, 1,000 compromises, each one small enough to justify, each one large enough to matter. Until the man who understood everything, who wrote the book on the cost of foolishness, became the clearest example of the very thing he warned the world about. Knowledge and discipline are not the same country. A man can know the cliff and still walk toward it. If the strongest man fell to it, what makes you certain you will not? If the wisest man built his ruin from 1,000 beautiful distractions, what makes you believe your wisdom is sufficient without the guard? The oldest enemy never arrives as an enemy. It arrives as exactly what you want. I watch men who believe their strength protects them, who believe that being strong enough in every other area creates immunity in this one. It doesn't. Strength in one room does not lock the other doors. The man who has mastered discipline in every direction, except the one that desire approaches, has mastered nothing. He has just built a fortress with one wall missing, and desire is patient enough to find it every time. The strength that wasn't enough, the wisdom that wasn't applied, in the silence of two great men who should have known better. This is not a condemnation. This is the oldest mirror the world has. Two men at the absolute peak of what a man can be, brought to the floor by the one thing they didn't govern. The lesson is not that desire is evil. The lesson is that desire is powerful, more powerful than muscle, more patient than wisdom. And the man who does not respect that power, who believes his strength exempts him, who believes his knowledge protects him, is standing exactly where Samson stood before the haircut, certain that his power was unconditional. It never is. If the strongest man fell to it, what makes you certain you will not? If the wisest man built his ruin from 1,000 beautiful distractions, what makes you believe your wisdom is sufficient without the guard? The oldest enemy never arrives as an enemy. It arrives as exactly what you want. He walks out tonight with the oldest warning carried close, not in fear, in respect. The respect of a man who read the story, understood the ending, and decided to guard the door that brought the two greatest men to their knees. Not because because he is stronger than Samson, not because he is wiser than Solomon, because he is wise enough to know he is neither. And that is exactly the right place to start. Guard the door, they didn't. The old most honest thing a man who survived himself has ever said out loud. There was a night I held the darkness like it was the only honest thing left. Not asking for attention, not performing pain, just a man alone with the conclusion that the math no longer worked. I won't dress it up, I won't make it cinematic. It was just a man, a room, and a silence so complete it had weight. Only the man who stood at the edge knows what the ground actually feels like. Only the man who wanted to leave understands what it means to stay. I stayed, and what came after, no comfortable man will ever know. The morning arrived the way mornings do, without permission, without asking if I was ready. Light through a window, coffee going cold, the ordinary machinery of a world that continued without consulting me. And something shifted, not dramatically, not like the stories tell it. Just a man noticing that the light had a quality he had never seen before, because he had never looked at it from this side of what he'd survived. Only the man who stood at the edge knows what the ground actually feels like. Only the man who wanted to leave understands what it means to stay. I stayed, and what came after, no comfortable man will ever know. I watch men complain about the living, the traffic, the weather, the ordinary weight of an ordinary day. And I say nothing, 'cause I know what the alternative tastes like. And I know that every ordinary day, every unremarkable morning, every glass of water, every conversation that means nothing, is something I once stood on the wrong side of, looking at it like a country I had lost my passport to. I had the passport, now I got it with everything I had. The abyss and the light, it exists only because of it. You cannot know full weight of living until you have held the full weight of its absence. feel the sun the same way after you have sat in the specific dark that asks you to choose. I chose, not easily, not heroically, just I chose. And the choosing gave me access to a dimension of living that comfortable men will never enter. The taste of coffee at 6 a.m., the cold air in the lungs on a winter morning, the sound of rain on a window that I am still here to hear. These are not small things, these are everything. Only the man who stood at the edge knows what the ground actually feels like. Only the man who wanted to leave understands what it means to stay. I stayed, and what came after, no comfortable man will ever know. He walks out tonight differently than other men. Not with more, not with less, just with the knowledge of what it costs to be here, and the particular gratitude of a man who knows exactly what he almost gave up. Every step on the cold street, a choice he once almost didn't make. He makes it again tonight, tomorrow, every day, the same quiet daily miracle of a man who stayed. I stayed, and I know the light after dark. I stayed, and I know how good it is to live. I stayed, and I know. The voice of a man who fought his hardest war entirely inside his own head. The feeling arrived like it owned the house, loud, certain, demanding immediate action, immediate words, immediate surrender to whatever it decided was true. I almost gave it everything, almost let the feeling speak for me, move for me, decide for me, the way feelings do when a man hasn't trained the one thing that was always supposed to be in charge. Train the mind, or the feelings train you. One of them is driving, one of them decides. The man who lets the feeling lead will follow it off every edge and lose himself in what he felt instead of what he chose. I have made decisions from the center of the storm, regretted every one. Not because the feeling was dishonest, never dishonest, they are just incomplete. They tell you what is happening inside, but they know nothing about what should happen outside. That is the mind's job, to take the feeling, receive it, understand it, and then decide what a man actually does with it. The gap between feeling and action is where character lives. Train the mind, or the feelings train you. One of them is driving, one of them decides. The man who lets the feeling lead will follow it off every edge and lose himself in what he felt instead of what he chose. I've watched men disappear into their feelings. Good men, strong men, men who had everything required to build something lasting. Undone by the specific moment when the feeling arrived too loud and the mind wasn't strong enough to hold the line. One moment, one surrender, one decision made from the inside of a storm instead of from above it. And the man they were building collapsed into the man they felt like. They felt like. The mind and the feeling, an honest negotiation, neither destroying the other. The mind simply choosing. The training is not the suppression. I need to say that clearly, because a man who buries his feelings is not strong, he is delayed. The feeling will surface with interest at the worst possible moment. The training is different. It is the daily discipline of feeling everything fully, honestly, without letting the feeling make the decisions that only a clear mind should make. Feel it, name it, hold it, then choose. That sequence, feel, name, hold, choose is the difference between a man who owns himself and a man who is owned by whatever he happens to feel today. Train you. One of them is driving, one of them decides. The man who lets the feeling lead will follow it off every edge and lose himself in what he felt instead of what he chose. Walks out tonight, having felt everything and acted on nothing that wasn't chosen. That is the victory, not the absence of feeling, the presence of choice. The street is cold, the feeling about the cold arrives immediately. He notes it, walking. That is the practice, that is the power, that is the man he decided to be. still standing, still strong. Mind over the feeling. Voice of a man who held on to the wrong thing long enough to finally understand why it kept letting him down. It disappointed me the first time, and I excused it. The second time I explained it. Third time I defended it to others, to myself, building arguments for something that had already given me its honest answer twice. It kept disappointing me, not out of cruelty, out of truth. It was telling me the only thing it knew how to say, this was never yours. What is not meant for you will disappoint you until you tire. Not to punish, to teach. Every disappointment, the same lesson in a different coat. Release what was never yours and make room for what is. I've held things that were not mine with both hands, jobs, people, versions of myself, built for rooms that never wanted the real one. Held them past the first sign, past the second, past the point where any honest man would have understood. Because letting go felt like a losing, until I understood that holding the wrong thing with both hands means both hands are unavailable for what was actually coming. For you will disappoint you until you tire. Not to punish, to teach. Every disappointment, the same lesson in a different coat. Release what was never yours and make room for what is. Watch men exhausted by the wrong thing, pouring everything into what keeps returning empty. And I recognize it, the particular exhaustion of a man who mistakes persistence for wisdom. Persistence is a virtue with the right thing. With the wrong thing, it is just a longer version of the same disappointment. Arriving at the same ending, having spent more to get there. The door that keeps closing is not a door that needs a harder knock. It is a door that is not yours. Never feels like victory. It feels like a loss, because 'Cause for a long time the wrong thing was the only thing, and empty hands feel like failure before they feel like freedom. But there is a moment, and it always comes, when the hands that finally open receive something that fits them so completely that the man understands all at once. The disappointments were not failures, they were directions. Every door that closed on him was pointing somewhere else, and he just needed to stop knocking long enough to turn around and see it. What is not meant for you will disappoint you until you tire. Not to punish, to teach. Every disappointment, the same lesson in a different coat. Release what was never yours and make room for what is. He walks out tonight with open hands, not empty, open. There is a difference that took him years to understand. Empty is the absence of what was lost. Open is the preparation for what is still coming. He walks toward it without knowing what it is, only knowing that it is more likely to arrive now that he's stopped, filling his hands with what was never meant to stay. Open hands now, making room for mine. Open hands now, what is mine will come. Open hands now. Open hands now. The voice of a man who finally understood where his power actually lived. The storm doesn't ask for your approval before it arrives. The loss doesn't check if you are ready. The betrayal doesn't wait for a convenient season. Life is not interested in your preparation. What is interested, what is always watching, is what you do in the first moment after impact. Not the second, not when you've had time to compose yourself. The first moment, raw, unscripted, honest. That moment is your character introducing itself. It's the man who decides what it means. The event is neutral, the response is everything. Reason over reaction, courage over comfort, justice over convenience. A man who masters what lives inside him cannot be mastered by anything outside. I have been hit by things I did not deserve. I want to say that plainly, because the stoic way is not the pretending way. It is not the pretense that everything is fair, that the universe distributes its weight with any particular concern for who can carry it. It doesn't. The stoic way is simpler and harder. It is the understanding that fairness is not the variable. Responses, and response is the one thing that was always entirely mine. It's not what happens, it's the man who decides what it means. The event is neutral, the response is everything. Reason over reaction, courage over comfort, justice over convenience. A man who masters what lives inside him cannot be mastered by anything outside. I watch men destroyed by circumstance, not because the circumstance was stronger, because they handed it the authority to define them. One event, one verdict, one morning that became the explanation for everything that followed. I decided differently. What happened to me is the weather, who I am is the structure. Weather changes, structure is chosen, built, maintained daily. In the hours when nothing is happening and nobody is watching, and the only work is the quiet discipline of a man deciding what he is made of. Reason in adversity, in honest negotiation. Reason winning, not by force, by preparation. Virtue is not the reward at the end. Virtue is the practice in the middle. In the middle of the loss, the middle of the betrayal, the middle of the circumstance that arrived without asking. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision made in its presence. Justice is not what the world gives you. It is what you give, regardless of what the world gave you first. And freedom, real freedom, is not the absence winds of adversity. It is the man who walks through adversity and arrives on the other side, still entirely himself. That man cannot be touched by what happens to him, only by what he chooses to do with it. It's not what happens, it's the man who decides what it means. The event is neutral, the response is everything. Reason over reaction, courage over comfort, justice over convenience. A man who
most honest thing man has ever admitted, without apology. I stopped waiting to be understood. The year I turned 13, learned that the weight a boy carries is his alone to carry, and nobody enters that particular room, and nobody should, not because they're cruel, because they can. The door was built from the inside. Only I have a key, only I know. What lives there? Nobody's coming. I made peace with that. No one holds a man when the man starts to crack. No arms for the demons, no witness for the war. Just a man and his darkness behind a closed door, and I am comfortable there. I have always been comfortable there. I don't expect to be held when the floor gives out. Don't expect a hand in the particular dark that only visits me at 3 a.m. when the armor is off and the body remembers everything. The mind spent all day trying to forget. I expect nothing that is not emptiness. That is the most honest relationship a man can have with his own life. I am alone with my demons. I know each one by name. We have an understanding. They don't win, I don't pretend they aren't there. Nobody is coming. I made peace with that. No one holds a man when the man starts to crack. No arms for the demon, no witness for the war. Just a man in his darkness behind a closed door, and I am comfortable there. I have always been comfortable there. Men collapse when the loneliness arrives, surprised by it, like they expected something different. I was never surprised. I was trained early by silence, by rooms where strength was the only acceptable language, by fathers who carried what their fathers carried, without translation, without complaint, handing down not the wound but the discipline of surviving it alone. A man has an obligation not to be perfect, not to be fearless, not to be without the particular darkness that visits all of us. The obligation is simpler and harder than all of that, to be strong enough that the mind doesn't break before the body delivers what needs to be delivered. Strong mind, strong body, no audience, no applause, just a daily, private, unglamorous act of a man who chose to carry it and keep moving. Nobody is coming. I made peace with that. No one holds a man when the man starts to crack. No arms for the demon, no witness for the war, just a man and his darkness behind a closed door, and I am comfortable there. I have always been comfortable there. He walks out alone, the way he always walks. No one waiting, no one watching, just the road and the weight and the particular dignity of a man who never asked to be rescued, because he learned long before tonight that rescue was never part of his story. And his story, his story. Like suffering arriving in light, and stay until it taught everything. I don't thank the ones who loved me, I thank the ones who didn't, the ones who showed me what I was made of, by refusing to believe I was made of anything. They handed me the fire, thinking it would finish me. Didn't know I'd been cold long enough to find a fire relief. Pain was the only teacher who never left the room, never softened the lesson, never arrived too soon. Every suffering delivered something no comfort could. The specific shape of who I am, carved from what I withstood. I've sat with devastation like it was a dinner guest, passed it every kind of silence, let it take what it thought best. When it left, I counted what remained, less than before. But what was left was iron, pure, tested, mine. No one gives you that. No circumstance hands it across. You only find it on the other side of a particular kind of loss. Pain was the only teacher who never left the room, never softened the lesson, never arrived too soon. Every suffering delivered something no comfort could. The specific shape of who I am, carved from what I withstood. Bar is full of men tonight who never met their bottom. You can tell by how they carry the lightness of the unlost. Nothing wrong with that, but there's something in the eyes of men who have been all the way down. A particular clarity, a particular calm, the calm of a man who knows the words already happened, and he's still Nobody chooses suffering, but some men choose what they do with it. And that choosing, that specific moment, when a broken man looks at the ruins and picks up the first brick, that is the moment that separates the men who were destroyed from the men who were built. I picked up the brick in the dark, alone, without applause, and I laid laid it down where the foundation needed to be. Pain was the only teacher who never left the room, never softened a lesson, never arrived too soon. Every suffering delivered something no comfort could. The specific shape of who I am, carved from what I withstood. He walks out into the cold, coat pulled tight, cigar burning low, carrying everything the night gave him, which was never warmth, never comfort, never easy. Just a particular power of a man who turned every wound into a wall nobody can climb. Pain made me this, still standing strong. Pain made me this, where I belong. Man returning to the only place that never changed. Same corner, same delight, same glass I always choose. Some men come here for the company, I come here for the blues. Not running from something, not hiding from a name. Just a man who found one honest place inside a world of games. The walls have seen my younger face, I've seen it aging thin. Never once asked what had happened, always just let me in. Some nights I don't need answers, some nights I don't need words, just the low and honest darkness and the music that is heard by the part of me that language never learned how to reach, the part that only minor keys have ever thought to teach. There were years I came here broken, sad and didn't know it yet. Thought the ache was temporary, learned it was the alphabet, the language of a man who lived past what he thought he'd bear. Every note of confirmation, somebody else was there. Somebody else had sat exactly in this corner, felt this way, left it in the strings and walked out, slightly less alone, slightly grave. Some nights I don't need answers, some nights I don't need words, just the low and honest darkness and the music that is heard by the that language, never learned how to reach the part that only minor keys have ever thought to teach. Bartender moves like water, seen 1,000 men like me, men who order without speaking, men who tip generously, men who hold their glass like something fragile lives inside the drink, men who come to sit in public so they don't have to think, alone inside a quiet house where silence has no note, where the ache has no compass, just a man and his own throat. That always receive you, no questions, no conditions, just the music and the dark. I have tried the other remedies, tried the noise, tried the light, tried the company of daylight people, living fast and living bright. Came back here every time, to the corner, to the low, because brightness never helped me the way darkness seems to know. That a man like me needs minor, needs a slow, needs a long, needs a place that doesn't ask him to be anything but gone. Into the music, into the quiet, into something true. Particular kind of honest only this dark corner knew. Some nights I don't need answers, some nights I don't need words, just the low and honest darkness and the music that is heard by the part of me that language never learned how to reach, part that only minor keys have ever thought to teach. I leave the way I always leave, tab paid, no goodbye, same corner waiting for next time, patient underneath the sky. I'll be back when life gets heavy, back when words run out again, back when nothing else can hold me, back when this is all that's left. The street is cold, the night is wide, the blues still playing in my chest, the only home I always find by coming back to what knows best. Same dark corner always brings me back. Same dark corner, honest in the black. Same dark corner.